President's order restricting people coming to this country from largely Muslim nations, and the federal judges, a couple of federal judges getting involved.
Well, look, he promised this during the campaign, extreme vetting. But I think people might have been surprised. I think that they might have been led to believe that rather than suspending the issuance of new visas, they didn't expect him to turn back people who already had visas, including people who had green cards. And that's how the federal judges got involved.
No, we should explain that. So you got a green card, you're a permanent resident in this country, legal resident in this country, you've gone on a trip someplace else, now you can't get back in.
Or you have received a visa approved by the United States government in the recent past, and you got on an airplane and showed up at the airport, and suddenly that visa, which had been given to you by the United States government, is no longer legitimate and valid.
Donald Trump would say, too bad.
Not too bad. Well, but a federal judge said you could cause irreparable harm. In fact, one of the first people who had such a visa who was stopped at the New York airport, as luck would have it, is somebody who worked for the U.S. government in Iraq for the last 10 years. Not exactly, if you want to have a long, happy life, a good thing to do in Iraq. So, you know, look, the president's following through on his commitment, but it strikes me that it might have been better. He wants the Secretary of the Homeland Security and the Secretary of State in the next 30 days to come up with the information that they need, and those two plus the Director of National Intelligence and the FBI Director in the next 60 days to come up with a plan for extreme vetting. It might have been better to say suspend the issuance of any new visas, rigorously monitor people who come into the country from these 7 countries who have a visa or permanent residents who come back in the country, and then in 90 days we have a complete new plan that we can then begin issuing new visas.
Chuck, as we say, this is already in the courts, and at this point, I guess you got something like 300 people who are in kind of limbo at U.S. airports. What's the fallout, both politically and legally, here?
Whatever it is, it's entirely self-inflicted. This was all avoidable for the White House. They put this thing together without a full interagency process. They put it together, obviously, without thinking through the green card angle and all its potential ramifications. And they produced an order that sort of is like a lose-lose-lose for them. It's not even the full Muslim ban he promised at one point. This is the sort of climb-down position, and yet he produces something that's over-inclusive in that it brings in all the green card people, and under-inclusive in that it leaves out, as you pointed out earlier, a number of countries, such as Pakistan or Afghanistan, from whence terrorists have come. So obviously there's huge uproar on the Democratic side. That was predictable. But very interestingly, I counted at least 3 Republican senators who voiced concerns about how this thing has worked out. So it's not even entirely clear that he's going to have unified Republican support behind this thing unless they can clean it up very quickly.
Dana, you worked for a president who famously and very in a concentrated way made the point, we're at war with terrorism, we're not at war with Muslims. Do you worry that this ends up changing that message?
Well, I do think it's important to point out that it's a moratorium, not a ban, so there is time for them to be able to figure it out, so it's not like it's a permanent thing. I also think that some of the responses today in the explanation, like from Kellyanne Conway earlier on your show, helped explain a little bit more about the decision-making process. And when they say that this was an Obama administration recommendation, I think that would have been a helpful thing to use initially. So I call that an ounce of prevention. How can you explain things more? Because what we found, and I think President Obama found it too, is that you can't get everyone to agree with a decision, but you should be able to get them to respect the decision-making process. And I think the Trump administration would be well served if it explains things a little bit more on the front end to avoid confusion on the back end, so that more of those stories that Kellyanne Conway was talking about, the underreporting of all the good stuff, could get more play.